the difference between Tanisaro's book and Goenka.
Sure. I found some similarities though. In the stages of the meditation in Tanisaro's book, I think first is finding a comfortable breath, then staying with the breath, then it's focusing on a point, right? Is that the third step?
No, not at all. This focusing on one pointedness actually is a much later practice that is
No,
actually more of a toy to play with. Yes. That
but
in
it's
fact
like,
there's no place in the suttas where the nose tip or the nose is in fact ever mentioned.
but it's in the book
That
though.
yeah, it's in the book. It's in a lot of books.
Okay, so you don't agree? You don't practice personally as it's stated in that book.
In Ajahn Tanisaro's book, I don't know. I haven't read it.
Oh, do you mind if I go get it? I think it's nearby here.
No, you don't need to do that.
Okay.
No, we got better things to do than read books.
Well, yeah. That leads me to an important question, which is how do you practice? Like, do you have steps too, or is it just like fully with the breath and guiding it towards parts of the body and relaxing even every
All
time?
right. Let's react re state that question
Okay.
into the question of what practice did the Buddha teach? What was the way that the Buddha taught anapanasati? That would be a better question. Or exactly another question related to that was, how did the various teachings of the Buddha fit in with anapanasati?
Mm-hmm.
So that we can come up with a way of practice that's actually practicing the Eightfold Noble Path. Another way of thinking of it is that anapanasati is the application of the Eightfold Noble Path. Most specifically, right view, right sati, right effort, and right sankappa, or attitude. Okay, so anapanasati is to be practiced through the Eightfold Noble Path, and one of the key ingredients is right effort. That in fact that's the key that most people miss.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot of translation errors that cause people to miss. But one of the really main issues is that they misunderstand right effort. And so I will describe to you an easy way to understand right effort, and that is to do the least amount of work possible to actually get the job done.
I
That's
like that
one's
very much.
right effort. To do the least amount of work possible to actually get the job done.
Yeah,
And
that.
that most people work either too much or too little. And if
Mhm.
they're working too little, they can call it choiceless awareness.
Yeah.
And if they're working too hard, then they can call it deep meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And that these are the two extremes that are mostly practiced in Western culture. That in fact, this is the whole way that it's practiced in the Western culture comes out of a practice that was developed for the military government of Burma back in the 1950s. And that's the 10-day meditation retreat that Goenka got into, made very famous. Then the Mahasis started to follow that method too. And pretty soon that whole idea of a 10-day retreat with variations on the number of days came into being in the West as almost an appendage of Buddhism. And yet it was only invented in the 1950s.
They
And
claim that it was older, though, right?
well, maybe some features of it, but we're talking about the actual thing that Western people see when they think of meditation and meditation halls and all of that. But in the suttas, the Buddha says to go to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut. He didn't say to go to a meditation hall with 50 or 60 or 100 or 500 other people, but go to an empty forest instead, to go into real seclusion. So that's one of the differences right there. Another difference is that normally the Dhamma is taught one-on-one, like we're having this conversation now, and it was never, it was, let us say there have been public talks for forever. The Buddha also spoke publicly.
Mm-hmm.
But much of the actual work is done in private. And if one does retreats and all one ever has is a contact with the teacher is when the teacher's up on the stage, up on the dais or platform or whatever you want to call it, and you don't have an actual personal relationship with the teacher, then that's what you wind up with Western Buddhism, especially if the teacher is expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the part that has Western Buddhism more Western than Buddhism, because in fact the 10-day retreats are often set up like a first grade classroom.
Yeah.
But a PhD research project is not set up in rows of chairs. And neither are Watts.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I've never seen monks sit in a row whenever they're sitting around in one of the boats, or most of them are sitting against the wall, leaving a space in the middle for things to happen.
Okay.
So there's a lot of Westernism built into what you see in the actual teachings of the Buddha, but you can also say that, yes, there is some Buddhism in there someplace.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but only some, that some of the major ingredients have been missing. One of the examples of it is right effort.
Yeah.
Is that you have to put some skin in the game. In fact, the joke is that how much skin do you have to put in the game? All of it, the whole body. The whole body has to get into the practice. You have to wake up the whole body. You have to take control of the body. You have to start noticing what the hands are doing. You have to notice what expressions you have on your face. You have to notice your posture, because you can notice your posture. You have to know when you're smiling and when you're not smiling. You have to start paying attention to what's happening.
So you try to maintain a full body awareness at all times?
No, not all the time. All the time is a Western concept.
Right now.
Just right now, right. Whenever you remember to. When sati is there and the skill of watching what's going on is developing. You start paying attention to what's happening with the body. Start paying. In fact, a way of looking at it is that within the teachings of the Buddha, there are 6 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. And that most of us Westerners spend almost all of our time in the mind, and the input to the mind is its own memory systems. And we spend very little time in real senses, and the real senses is what contacts and has input from reality of this present moment. So a lot of the teaching of the Buddha has to do with be here now, which means be in our senses and pay attention to what's happening with the senses right here, right now, rather than making up stories about right here, right now with the mind.
Yeah, that's a bit tricky for me.
It's tricky for everybody. It's not just
Yeah,
tricky, it's a bad habit.
yeah, but a specific example is in the book I mentioned to you by Ajahn Tanisaro. He mentions ardency, and I relate that very much to the right effort. But he puts it as a part of the 3 elements of concentration: ardency, alertness, and mindfulness. And he defines
Wait a
ardency.
minute. You're using the word artistry?
No, ardency, like ardent, ARDENCY.
All right. Let's change that from the connotation that has word puts into it, and use eager or
Yeah.
enthusiastic instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
enthusiasm, and what are the other 2?
Alertness and mindfulness.
What's the difference between alertness and mindfulness?
As he defines those terms in the book, alertness is the body awareness, like what you said, knowing what's happening in the body in the present moment. What sensations are you feeling? What's happening? And mindfulness is the ability to stay with that intention.
All right. So basically, what he's actually talking about then, in the language that you've given here, so the way that you're talking about it, is uh, right view and right sati, which are actual factors on the path. And right view and right sati, sati means to wake up, and right view is and to see what's going on. For instance, the example would be to wake up and smell the coffee. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is perhaps what you're talking about, right view and right sati. And then the ardency would be the right attitude, which would be samma sankappa. And so where's the 4th item, which is one's right effort? Because right effort and right sati and right uh, view run and circle around each other. And then when you get those going as a skill, you develop also samma sankappa, which is in fact the ardency, or a better word is enthusiasm. And even a better word would be right attitude, the attitude of a winner, the attitude of can do this. And
Could
as
be
that
right.
develops, it develops into the point of no matter what hindrances come into the mind, those can be cleaned out, and I can come back to this present moment to see how things are right here, right now. Can see the truth of the moment. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This actually is a quotation out of a sutta. And the next statement of it is that this first knowledge that one can, in fact, clean out the mind and come back to this present moment is the first step of the path. And it is super mundane. It is a factor of the path. It is noble, and it is not held by ordinary people. Ordinary people do not know that they can, in fact, clean out their mind. And even if they know that they can, they don't trust that they can do it just when they need to do it the most. So the first step of Sotapan, the first step on the path, is the knowledge that no matter how much my mind gets messed up, I can turn that stuff around immediately, throw that stuff out, come out of the mental states into the senses, receive new data, be here in the present moment, and feel the way that I want to feel. Which means that now I have control over the way I feel, I have control over the breathing, I have control over the mind. That I am not driven by my own thoughts and my own belief systems. These are the 4 first items on the Eightfold Noble Path, and that leads to unification of mind. Sama area samadhi. When the mind is unified and organized, which means that all the cylinders are firing in the same direction, I suppose would be the way to say it. Only then, when we are organized and the mind is unified, is the mind then free from all desires and wants. And if you are, in fact, satisfied in the moment and free from desire, then you don't want anything. And if you don't want anything, you're unlikely to hurt someone, to steal it, to lie about it, or to break any of the precepts. The precepts are just naturally done when the mind is noble. So that's the Eightfold Noble Path for you. And so that ardency, or that right view, or excuse me, that right attitude, that can-do attitude, is a major aspect of the Eightfold Noble Path, but one will not develop that without also the right effort to put into it. And if they don't put in the right effort, that means they also don't develop sati to the point of remembering it often enough for it to be of any real value. It just happens occasionally, like when somebody goes to the meditation hall and the whole rest of the day, all 23 hours of hindrances. What good is that kind of meditation? So anapanasati is to be done whenever you remember to do it. And part of the skill that we're developing is to remember to do it. This is why we want to start putting sati foremost in the sense of everything we do. The way that the Anapanasati Sutta is actually stated is over and over and over and over again is sati. You see that. Mindfully, one breathes in and mindfully one breathes out, which means you've got to do this with sati, but it's a deep in breath. Mindfully breathing in deep and mindfully breathing out deep. Now, what that means is deep and is kind of like slowing it down and getting more air in, but only a little bit more air, a comfortable amount. That this is not a contest of empty and full. This is a concept of a long, deep, easy, relaxed breath that energizes the body and purifies the blood, because it throws out the carbon dioxide, which then gives reason for more carbon dioxide to come into existence, because the frontal cortex is working better now. And so that breathing actually is a major part of the teaching of the Buddha. And they're only now beginning to understand that, but most of the breathing research that's done doesn't have the second part of it there. They're only working with the breathing without working with the mind. But in fact, you cannot learn to control the breathing if you can't learn to control the mind. So they kind of go hand in hand. And so that's why one's right effort is also to have wholesome thoughts, to put wholesome thoughts in the mind and to remove unwholesome thoughts and kick them out immediately. That Dukkha Niroda, which is the full-blown teaching of the Buddha, that's all he teaches, is Dukkha Niroda. The way that it's practiced in the West, though, is dukkha. Let me see some of that dukkha. I got to inspect that dukkha. I'm going to go really deep in it. I'm going to understand that dukkha completely. And maybe someday I'll have some Dukkha Niroda. But that's not the teaching of the Buddha. The teaching of the Buddha is dukkha and dukkha niroda right now in this present moment. Throw that stuff out. Throw out that ignorance and that wanting and that wanting to get rid of. That greed, ill will, and delusion is the cause of our unsatisfactoriness. So practicing becoming satisfied is actually going into the third noble truth, which is freedom from dukkha, which means now we don't want anything. We're satisfied. Right now it's good enough. And so when we talk about bringing in joy, somebody will say, yeah, I've got joy, but I want more. It's not good enough joy. I should have great big joy, and I only have a little joy. Poor me. Well, what that means is that they're actually developing being dissatisfied with even joy.
Yeah.
Instead of
There you
having
go.
some joy and being satisfied that they've got a little. And then we begin to develop the skill of being joyful and develop the skill of being satisfied.
Question there. Would you recommend to each person, to every person who had the possibility to follow the like this method, or do you think that it's like not for
Guess what?
everyone?
I probably will never talk to everyone. I certainly will not talk to each and every person.
Yeah, but
We can get down to how about the people who call on Skype?
yeah, but specifically,
You see,
I
one of
wanna.
them is grandiose. The everybody's in your mind is just a concept.
Oh yeah, but I have a specific like aspect I want you to answer, like the seclusion and training of the mind versus following goals that aren't meant to bring joy, but like people that feel that they're destined to do something, or that yeah, something that's like involved with the world and not directly working with the mind.
Destiny
Yeah,
can
it's
be
like
looked at in two ways.
yeah.
One of them is we can see destiny as a habit pattern of the mind,
Hmm.
in the sense that if you look at the way that a gun is pointed, you could pretty much determine which direction the bullet's going to go if it's fired, right? You could pretty much, in other words, if the gun is waving around towards your knees back and forth, you don't like that so much, because if that gun goes off, you might lose a knee, right? So you begin to pay attention to guns and the way that they're, which direction they're pointed.
Yeah.
This is an important point. Okay, so um, the way things are headed then becomes uh, a way of looking, that we start looking at things and see which directions they're going, so that we can uh, recognize that this pathway that we've been on, this set of actions that we've set in motion that have to do with um, uh, initiation and response, followed by another, and we get into this thing that builds momentum, and so one kind of goes. An example of that is he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. That's an understanding of destiny. Which way are things headed? And
Hmm.
we can see it that the reason that things are headed in that direction is because that's the direction that they have been headed, and the more than likely they're going to continue to head in that direction unless something changes. Now there's a whole new way of looking at that for this moment, and that is that we can see that this destiny is also another way of thinking that in short terms it's being driven, that we feel driven. An example of that is the guy who is a big fan of Sport Team A happens to be standing on a street corner where two guys are discussing the wonders and marvels of Team B, and he's right there with them, and he feels driven and compelled to start arguing with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
That's
he
another
feels
way
strongly
of
about it.
looking. Pardon?
Because he feels strongly about it.
Because he feels strongly about it. All right. So he feels driven or he feels strongly about it, and yet he is not in control of those feelings at all. Those feelings came out of his past. If he were in this present moment, he could easily recognize whatever those guys are doing is their business, is not my business.
Yeah.
And he might have saved himself a bloody nose just by waking up to recognize this is not my business.
Yeah.
So that's an example of driven by this destiny, and is kind of also an example of living out in our past and continuing to go that way. So this is what sati and right effort and the right view, leading to a change of attitude, is what the Buddha's teaching is all about, which basically means that you can change. A big issue in the time of the Buddha, and a big issue now within Christianity, is that you can't change. In fact, Christianity is absolutely built on all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Who are you to think that you're good? Only God is good. You can't save yourself because you've got original sin, and you need our magic pill to save you. What's our it's got Jesus written on his magic pill, right?
Yeah.
That's the way that it's taught. Is taught that you cannot change, which means that you cannot resist this old nature that you've built up from childhood. And the Buddha says, yes, you can change, that you are not fixed, that you are not ground in. This is where the whole idea of anatta comes from. That the idea in the old days of the Buddha was that there was something, a self, that was actually more like a soul in Christianity, something that is so strong and so permanent and so fixed that it'll even survive death. But it's also nothing but a football. And that God's going to kick you in any direction that he wants to. And their story is that not only will he kick you into heaven or hell after you're dead, but he does that now and you just don't know it. This is the Christian story, is that you are a permanent being that is subject to the will of God, and that you don't have any choice in it.
Yeah.
This is their teaching. The Buddha says, oh no, you've got plenty of choice. You've got plenty of choice.
Yeah.
Because why? Because you are not that kind of soul. You are not that kind of self. And when we recognize that, that means that now we not only can be free from the self, we can be free from all the confines of that self, which is basically the first and the second fetter. The first fetter is personality view. And the personality view that we all have to get over is that I cannot change my own mind. That is hard to do. Okay. The answer to that is, well, it doesn't take long to change it right now. Just try it right now. Just do it right now. Never mind about the future. Just can we do it right now? Can we change our mind from being a fraidy cat or a pity party or a ain't it awful or I'm going to beat the hell out of you kind of attitude into, hey man, everything's cool. That's all we have to do is begin to change our attitude and change our thoughts and to be cool. But gosh, we have to remember doing it so often because we have already started bending in a certain direction, which was the direction that we were bent by society when we were little kids. that humans are controlled by our society. The society would even say that the kid would become a barbarian if we don't train him. You got to train up a child in the way he should go, so when he is old, he'll kiss your ass. That's in the Bible, but I changed the line.
Guide the child in his way so that when he's older, he won't steer away from it. Something like that.
Yeah, we have to learn to bend to authority when we're children, because when we're adults, we won't do it. In fact, the last time that it can be done is when they take young men into the military. They do not want 35-year-old men in the military, because when the drill sergeant says, "Attention," the 35-year-old is going to be the last one to stand up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They certainly don't want 70-year-olds in their military, because the 70-year-old's not even going to bother to stand up. No, they want them to be 18 so that they can put the fear of doing it our way into them. So
Were you ever in the military?
Oh, yes. U.S. Navy.
Wow.
I know
How
all
long?
about that. Not long enough, or too long.
I was in a U.S. Military medical ship once. They came here. Yeah,
Pardon?
it was some years ago. A U.S. Military ship that was providing medical aid came to the Caribbean coast here, and that was my only experience with military people. But it was weird, like seeing them stick to such a strict regime, and also seeing how similar it was to how they depicted the stereotypical people in the movies. But yeah, it's a hard life, definitely.
Well, it's very characteristic, though, that that's what our society does for us in microcosm, so that we get in line and we start marching according to the educational system. We start marching towards the way that big business is guiding us. An example of that is the iPhone, Apple.
Mm-hmm.
But 40, 50 years ago, it was the Mustang and the hot rod. All right, so consumer goods and consumer products drives our desires. In fact, I talk about it in the sense of the GREB, GREB. We have big government, big religion, big education, and big business. And they're all telling you the same thing that the Christians tell you. And that is, you need our help. You can't do it without us. You're not good enough to do it on your own. The business then adds the line, you need our product.
Yeah.
And the education says, you need our knowledge. And the government says, you need us to fix all of your business problems. And the religion says, well, you know what they say. They say, we own you already anyway.
Yeah. They have us threatened with hell.
And so all of them operate on fear.
Yeah.
Well, we have built a society that's quite safe. I mean, if you think about it, 600,000 years ago, life was pretty tough. Lots of dangers. Too many alligators, too many lions, not enough elephant guns, all kinds of problems. And so fear is an emotion that actually predates even mammals, that in fact we can even see evidence of fish schooling that gives rise to wildebeest and zebras herding together. And that gives rise to humans wanting to have a nest, wanting to have society, to go
Yeah, you
along
talk
to get
about
along.
the herding instinct.
Yes, that we are in fact being herded around because we're too stupid to wake up to the fact that we are being herded around. And when we recognize it, we can put a stop to it. We can see that danger. But until we do, we're satisfied in a way. We get some sort of reward for going along to get along. And that is that going along to get along at least keeps us safe for the moment. Because if we don't go along to get along, we might get eaten by the bears.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's very, very little relief, but we're willing to take it and also have to suffer the dangers from it. And so much of the teaching of the Buddha is to wake up to the dangers that we normally see gratification in, especially the kind of thoughts that we have. So that if we see that there is danger in that kind of thinking, then we can put that thought down and start thinking thoughts that have no danger built in them at all.
Like,
Pardon?
the breath, or do you mean? Oh yeah, I had a question a while ago about the how do you say the positive thinking? I don't know. I don't remember the term you used. But I've tried like the other way around to like in a scientific way to prove by the contrary. Like I started thinking a lot of negative things, and I see how that and I saw how that affected my my demeanor, my state of my emotional state in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it were like very tacky, corny thoughts, and I was wondering if that works like on the opposite. If corny positive thoughts work well too, or do you have like any recommendations on how to uh, shape that positive thinking?
Well, first off, let's determine a bit about the distinction between positive thinking and wholesome thoughts.
Oh yeah, wholesome thoughts. Sorry,
Okay.
is the term.
When we use the term power of positive thinking, normally what that refers to is affirmations or hoping or pretending or thinking that if I think about it, I'll get what I'm thinking about. The power of attractions or whatever like that. So you have the teenage girl that's standing in front of the mirror telling herself how beautiful she is with these powerful positive thoughts.
Hmm.
But she really doesn't believe it deep inside anyway. And so when she goes out to school, any little thing that's said, and she feels terrible. If she actually thought she was beautiful, then those kind of words wouldn't harm her at all. And so the distinction between positive thoughts are often that they're not real, that they're really at just affirmations that really deep inside that we don't believe it. That really what we're looking for then would be wholesome thoughts that would always be true in this moment. An example of that is this breath is life giving.
Hmm.
Another one would be this breath actually is delicious. It's a relief. If you don't believe that, then stop breathing for 5 or 10 minutes and then see what like that first next breath is going to be like. You'll really like it.
Yeah,
Okay. So
I've I've tried that, but like after sometimes you get sort of tired, or the monkey mind gets bored, and that wholesome thought like starts to lose effectiveness. You know.
well, that's to be expected. That's because of the habits that you've already built up of unwholesome thoughts over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
That the easy way to say it is, look, you have been spending your whole life talking yourself into feeling bad. Now it's time to start talking yourself into feeling good. And pretty soon or someday, that's all you'll have to say. But right
Mm-hmm.
now, you're still telling yourself a lot of trash at least now start to put some good stuff in there.
Yeah. You always mention
So
that
if you,
example. Like, do the wholesome thoughts limit themselves to that, to the breath, or do you have any other
oh
pointers or
no,
examples?
any thought that has to do with the reality of the situation, which is all of your senses,
Okay.
that in fact
Like,
you really do appreciate your sight. If you don't believe me, go around for a day or two completely blindfolded intentionally so that you cannot see anything.
hmm
Boy, will that wake up the other senses. That blind people are known to have extraordinary senses of their surroundings and sounds and things like this. That they're paying attention to stuff that most people don't pay attention to at all. So that's one of the practices is to go around blindfold
hmm
because it wakes you up.
You
Another
mean
one
you
is to
have
go
you
around
tried to-
barefooted because then you have to watch where you're stepping. You have to notice what's going on.
yeah. Have
But
you
I'll
made
go
that
ahead.
part of your practice?
Pardon? Over the
Have
years,
you?
sure, I've done all this stuff.
Mhm. Cool. I'll try that then. So you could, another way to say it is apart from uh, thoughts about the breath, then another category you could say is affirmations you do believe in. Like the girl won't say, "Yeah, I'm beautiful," and then crumble, but she might
Why do
say,
you want to be beautiful? What good is that?
"Oh, desires and such."
Right, that's a desire. So I am beautiful. That's an affirmation. You really don't believe it. You're as ugly as you know you are,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah.
Then, in fact, the funny part is that I don't have to look at me. Everybody else has to put up with how ugly I am, but I don't even have to look at it. I haven't been in front of a mirror in a long time.
Wow. Was it like a conscious decision? I won't face mirrors.
Actually, yes, but it happened before I was a monk. But that's actually part of the stuff that monks are not allowed. And I think
Really?
partially that had to do not with the fact that it's a looking glass or a mirror, but that it was almost in those days had to be made out of metal,
Mm-hmm.
which was almost always precious.
Mm,
Okay, so in those days, a looking glass was uh, valuable, which meant that it could be stolen, which then meant the monk would have felt a sense of loss and maybe blame somebody else. And so the best thing to do is let's not have any of those kind of things around. But it wound up being part of the tradition that monks don't need. And guess what? You don't need a mirror.
yeah.
The only reason you should have a mirror is to go find fault with yourself so that you'll go buy something. So the stores are the ones who want you to have mirrors in your house. If you don't have any mirrors, you probably don't go to the store because you don't care.
Yeah. Mm,
Beauty is also in
yeah.
the eye of
Most.
the beholder. And often the beauty is not the object. Very rarely do we ever practice what you see is what you get. Generally, what happens is the guy will go into the 7-Eleven or whatever, and he's got a drop dead gorgeous babe right there behind the counter. And when he leaves the store, he's thinking about her. But guess what? He's not thinking about her. He's thinking about the mental image that he constructed about her. And the
Yeah.
mental image that he constructed about her fails to mention some of the reality of the situation that she's got 2 ex-husbands, she's got 3 kids at home, she's got a mother who hates any man who comes within an inch of her, and both of the ex-husbands hate each other and are out to kill each other. Okay, but when you see her on the street, you don't see any of that kind of stuff. There's realities that but we don't put that into our imagination. So in
Yeah.
fact, all we have inside the mind is just a fantasy. But now, guess what? We want our fantasy. So if we go back to see the girl thinking that this girl is my fantasy girl, no, the fantasy is in the mind. This girl is a real person.
But they have like a strong pull, these fantasies.
Right. So we fantasize and we create and mentalize what we want, and then reality doesn't meet up to it.
Yeah.
So the way to start to practice anapanasati with this eightfold noble path is to wake up, to look at the thought, to take a deep breath, and to recognize I don't have to think about that, whatever it was. I can think of something better than that to do. Like sit here and just look out and gaze upon the beautiful whatever those things are out there in big bushes or something. Uh, Actually, they're ferns, ancient
Big
ferns,
ones.
big ferns, right? 30 feet
Nice.
at least. So anyway, that's all conjecture. The reality is that it's a visual image is quite pleasant. So just being in the here now is also safe. My thoughts are dangerous. I can find all kinds of work to do. I can find all kinds of things that are unfinished that need this world is in great need of all kinds of things. You don't believe me? Watch CNN or Fox or something.
No, thank you. Yeah.
But this present moment is just pleasant. It's just so nice just to be here now. Wherever you are and whatever posture you are in, right now is good enough. And that's the practice of anapanasati, literally talking ourselves into being satisfied, talking ourselves into being safe, comfortable, content, secure. And the cream of it is satisfied. This is good enough. I don't want anything. That state of satisfaction is, in fact, just the opposite of dukkha. It's that language in the Pali, it's that language in the Thai and in Gujarati. In the Pali, dukkha and sukha are opposites. In Thai, duk and sukh are opposites. In Gujarati, duki and sukhi are opposites.
I've never heard of that language.
Pardon?
Gujarat. I had never
Pali?
heard of that language. No, Gujarati.
Gujarati is in India. It's in India. It's in northwest India in the Gujarat. It's an Indo-European language, to where Thai borrowed the words out of Buddhism. So this opposite of dukkha, if the all the teachings of the Buddha are about how coming out of dukkha into sukha, means that coming out of our dissatisfaction state and become satisfied, content, comfortable with the feeling of security that only mastery will bring. And so we have to master the mind, take control of the mind, take control of the breathing, take control of the way that we feel. And by doing so, we're on top of the world. That's what super mundane means, is being on top of the world. You're an emperor of your own pile of dirt. Are you going to be buried under your pile of dirt or sitting on top? Sitting on
Yeah.
top of the world sounds like the right way to be. Just don't
Yeah.
care about it. Just let it
That's right.
go. And we can do that any time that we can remember to do it. You can feel right now the way that you feel. You can remember this, and you can feel this way anytime that you want to. Satisfied and content. And if you practice that enough over and over again, we begin to add that fourth ingredient, sama sankappa, which is the right attitude of, I can do this anytime. that's also the association with the piti, that yeehaw, or that exhilaration of the knowledge that I've won, because I know that I can win anytime that I want. Anytime that I want to win over dukkha, I can win over dukkha. And so we get that feeling of power. The Buddha called himself a lion any minute. That lion is that attitude. But that attitude comes with mastery. And so that building up of the skills brings on that feeling of can do. It's a can do attitude. We come out of the victim's position into the winner's position. One example is it's kind of a joke. You hear this often, but you probably heard this: "Hold my beer." You know what
Yeah.
that means? It means
Yeah.
you hold this beer because I've got business and I'm going to win this business. I'm the champion here. That's the kind of attitude that we're looking for. Is the attitude of I can do this.
Hold my sati.
Mm-hmm. Or as they would do it in the comedy westerns or war movies, would give me a swig of that sake, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, sati,
Yeah.
that's the key, to wake up anytime and to recognize that you're okay, that this breath is keeping you alive, and you're sitting here and happy. Not fat, dumb, or happy, just happy,
Yeah.
wisely happy.
Right now I cannot manage happy, but right now I can manage like being at least up to the head in my garbage. Like stick out the head.
Is that satisfying?
Yeah, it is. Better
Okay,
than
that's the point. Yeah, become
yeah.
satisfied with what you've got right now. That's the skill to be developed. Clear example: guy wants to learn to play the piano. He buys the piano, goes to the store, he buys all kinds of music books, simple ones and hard ones. He takes a lesson from a piano teacher and goes back to the piano teacher the second lesson. But in between there, he doesn't practice the piano at all. He really wants to learn to play the piano, but he's not practicing the piano. Let's say he's practicing the flute or the violin or the guitar or maybe something not at all musical. Will he learn to play the piano that way?
Some people
How are you
get
going to learn to play satisfaction if you don't practice satisfaction? If you're going to learn to play the piano, you got to play the piano.
some people get struck in the head and they learn spontaneously to play instruments.
Uh, After some practice.
I have to research to study the data.
Pardon?
No, but no, it's just that I heard some a while ago that there were registered cases from people that get head concussions and spontaneously learn abilities. But it was just like a passing thing to mention.
All
But I
right, I
get the
tell you
example.
what, give me your address and I'll mail you a hammer and you don't have to call me anymore.
It was a joke.
I
I won't give
know.
you. I won't give you.
Ah, okay. Right. Yes, that's the
Getting
whole point, that excuse me.
yeah, getting pretty late here. I think I have to leave soon.
All right. Uh Well, we haven't really gotten into much of the detail of the practice yet, so
Oh, I know.
uh, we can finish that at a later time.
Yeah,
When
I just
when are you
wanted
going to
to
call back
take the
again?
opportunity.
Pardon?
Maybe on Monday or Tuesday. Monday.
Oh, all right, that'll be fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I just had the time until now, but I wanted to take the opportunity now just to start the conversation. And
Yes.
I appreciate Yeah, you sharing the time.
Well, I've enjoyed it. It's been fun.
Me too.
All right.
Have a
Well, we'll
good
see
day.
you later.
Yeah.